So we shall then go on to our next speaker, Dr. Apurva, who's a consultant vitreoretina and uvea services at MM Joshi Eye Hospital. Again, a brilliant shining star of the future of ophthalmologists of our country. And she is going to be talking on effective use of autofluorescence in anterior uveitis. On to you.
In uveitis rather, ma'am. So,
yeah.
So thank you so much for the opportunity, and I feel really privileged to be on the same platform as everybody else, and great talks by the previous speakers and a hard act to follow. So the outline of my talk is going to be autofluorescence and its principle in a very brief manner. Why different AF patterns appear, some case presentations of my most interesting cases that I've seen, which have really not arrived at a proper diagnosis. And I would love for the panel to help me with that and to summarize in the end. So the principle, as we all know by now, is that it is a map.
No, they do much better like any other patient. So it is not.
I think
there is no change.
She's gone to the
but
other.
Incidence wise, they are coming.
Sunil?
A lot of patients are coming with anterior uveitis.
Mr. Sunil?
But it gets treated.
I think you have to ask
easy.
her to mute. She's in the other webinar. She can't keep both of them on full volume. Yes, Apurva.
Yes, ma'am. So it's basically a map of fluorophores. Basically, these fluorophores are some of the compounds which fluoresce without injection of contrast. So the absorption spectrum is about 300 to 600 nanometer, and the emission spectrum is 480 to 800 nanometers. Since lipofuscin is the most commonly found fluorophore in the retina, it is a map of lipofuscin distribution, we can say, and hence a map of RPE alterations, because lipofuscin accumulation is an indicator of RPE health. So I'll start presenting my cases. I would love if the panelists could interrupt me in between and ask their questions or chime in with their comments on the cases as well. Anyway, we have 12 minutes. So this was a 23-year-old woman who came to us with black spots in the temporal field of her right field of vision since 2 weeks. She was like a mild myope, like a moderate myope, -2 best corrected to 6/6 and N6. Anterior segment was normal. Fundus also was seen to be normal, and she was sent to retina department. And this, unfortunately, it's not a very well-centered fundus photograph of the right eye. But we did an AF considering her symptoms, and this is what we saw on the autofluorescence. These areas of kind of pseudopodial kind of hyperautofluorescence areas with a demarcation, more or less. And corresponding to that, on the OCT, there was this loss of outer retina or photoreceptor layer. And if we see closely, there are some posterior vitreous cells as well. The left eye was absolutely normal. When we did the FA, there was a very mild hyperfluorescence in a wreath, as we say, around corresponding to the hyperautofluorescence. And I presumed it to be mutes, and we just told her to kind of take it easy. We told her, we advised observation, and this was her at 15 days itself. The hyperautofluorescent pattern is almost normalizing. She's not come back, so hopefully she's doing good. This is the second case, the diagnosis of which is still very fluid in my mind. So this is a 51-year-old woman, right eye more than left eye vision loss, sudden. Right eye vision was only counting finger close to face. Left eye, she was unaided 6/6 and N6 with correction. So this was the autofluorescence picture of the right eye, where we see this dark area of hypo AF corresponding to this fluid, which is possibly masking the RPE autofluorescence. And these areas of hyper AF with central dot hypo in some areas, like this is very clearly central hypo. So we did an FA and an ICG for this patient. The FA showed dark areas, I mean hypofluorescence in the areas corresponding to the hyper on the AF, and the ICGA showed these kind of not very round, discrete, a little random, a little more concentrated in the posterior pole, and fewer, I mean not throughout the fundus, only largely in the posterior pole and a little above the arcades. So there were some pinpoints here. and there was late leakage on the FA, and these late frames of the ICG showed hypo in the late frames as well. And this was the simultaneous OCT and ICGA. The left eye was normal. Like I was saying, this was not all over the fundus. It was only concentrated in these areas, and they were a little geographic, random. And this is the 102 degrees ICGA and FFA. We worked her up for the usual suspects. None of them were very contributory. We started her on 1 mg per kg oral steroids, and this was the response. We can see that the dark area has come down because of resolution of the fluid. There is this hyper which is persisting, but the central hypos are going away. And this was after 6 weeks of treatment, where there is not much of change except these hyper AF areas like streaks, which were corresponding to RP, multiple layers of RP or stippled RP at the OCT. So at 8 weeks, she experienced a recurrence. It looked very much like the first attack. This was at the left eye also this time. This time we gave her steroids and immunosuppressions, that is azathioprine, and she stopped oral steroids after about 2.5 months. Interestingly, there were some hyporeflective round areas on the infrared reflectance image. The OCT had normalized, the undulations had gone away, the fluid had gone away, the outer retina looked okay, although the outer retina looks a bit over here, but it didn't look like the typical VKH sort of OCT where the RP is very granular. It looked more of a normalized like an RP layer. So I hazarded a guess of very fluid APMPP, which kind of is more recalcitrant in our region. It could be like a recurrent kind of APMPP. So I would like the panelists to comment on that one either now or later. So this is the final AF picture of this patient. It doesn't look very remarkable, but the IR image, that the infrared reflectance image, still looks a lot like this. So the third case, which time do I have, ma'am?
You actually have 8 minutes
Okay.
altogether, but maybe a little here and there.
Okay, so I'll finish the next 2 cases also, and maybe after that we can take some comments. Only if there's time, I'll show the 5th case. So this is the 3rd case. This was a 25-year-old boy with right eye normal vision, left eye diminished vision, 618 and N10. These were some creamy yellow plecoid lesions in his fundus, and the AF showed kind of a diffuse hyper AF, ill-defined, that corresponded to some fluid at that area, and this AF corresponded to some hyperreflective material at the outer retina. The right eye AF was normal. So this was the FA and the ICG. FA showed initial hypo, and the ICG was hypo initially. It remained hypo in the late phases also. FA, on the other hand, started showing some hyperfluorescence and late pooling in the late frames. So systemic workup was negative. He was observed, and this was the resolution of the hyper AF in 15 days. So this is the next case, which is actually it's something I've submitted as a particular diagnosis, and I'm kind of inviting comments. So this is a 32-year-old healthy chap, which we saw early last year, presented with diminished vision in the right eye since 8 days, no fever, no flashes, floaters, no systemic illness. His right eye was only 3/60, left was 6/9. None of both eyes didn't have any AC or vitreous cells. This was his fundus photo of the right eye. There were some old heel lesions in the superior fundus and these active lesions at the edge. There was a hyper AF margin, which was kind of spreading sort of hyper AF margins, which were at the border of the old lesions. And this is the left eye, where we see this also is a fresh lesion, which is a little isolated like an island. And here there are some fresh margins. So we thought of some differentials for this. It could have been TB-SLC or SC or syphilitic placoid chorioretinitis. We first worked up for infectious causes. None of them were very contributory. He was started on oral steroids, tapered by every 7 days, which was probably not a good idea, tapering so quickly, but he was lost to follow up for a month, unfortunately, because this was the first lockdown. And when he came back to us, his right eye vision was only counting fingers, left eye had also dropped. Again, no cells. This was the right eye. It looks much more feathery, well-defined, and the retina is elevated as well. And these are a few islands of hyper AF that I'll come to in a moment. And this is the 1 month follow-up at presentation and 1 month follow-up. Left eye at presentation. This is at 1 month follow-up. This is at presentation and this is at follow-up. We can see that the hyper AF margins have become brighter. This time we did a CT chest and we found some old scarring, and we presumed ocular tuberculosis and started on AKT4 with 1.5 mg per kg oral steroids. But again, lockdown chronicles, so right eye vision dropped, left eye vision also further dropped. This is like a aggressive bushfire of the eye, like I call. This is progressing relentlessly, and this is also progressing relentlessly. So this is a summary of the fundus findings of the right eye and the AF findings of the right eye. This is a summary of left eye fundus and left eye AF. This corresponded very well to the OCT. Initially, there was ONL hyperreflectivity followed by thinning. And here again, ONL reflectivity of the acute lesions with hyporeflectivity of the EZ and atrophy in the final follow-up. This was the FFA and ICG, which shows atrophy, a non-specific vasculitic leakage, and actually I think it was pretty late when we did the FFA ICG, almost at the fag end of his presentation. So we diagnosed this as relentless placoid chorioretinitis, and unfortunately we couldn't save his vision, and he has not come back after that. Probably he felt very disillusioned with the therapy. So that's my case. This last case also I'll finish in just under a minute. This is a patient, 35-year-old man, who presented in October 2020. A black shadow in the left eye since 15 days is what he complained of. Vision was 6/6 and 6 in both the eyes. Anterior segment was normal. Right eye fundus looked like this. Left eye, there was this yellowish subretinal lesion with an orangish margin and another lesion here. So this was the OCT through the active looking margin, which showed some RP thickening, outer retinal layer waviness, and a kind of back shadowing also. And there was some subretinal fluid and like a double layering of the RP here. This was the octa, which showed void areas in this choriocapillaris slab as well as the choroidal slab. The ICG correlated very well with the octa. And there was some fuzzy leakage on the FA. So MON2 came out strongly positive. TPHA was negative. Everything else was normal. We started him on oral steroids alone. He was symptomatically better in 4 days. He continued steroids. When he got even better at 10 days, like we can see, we decided to taper, and this was at 30 days. But when we saw the AF, we saw that most of the lesions were beginning to get more and more hypo AF. And there was some kind of not very unsettling sort of hyper AF here. So we decided to add ATT even if he was getting better and the fovea was spared. He was 6/6 and 6, but we decided to add ATT. So to summarize, AF findings are useful for follow-up and monitoring of response to treatment. It co-localizes very well with ICGA and choriocapillaritis. Like I showed, the first case was mutes, second case was probably APMPP, second and third case. The fourth case of relentless placoid chorioretinopathy, again a choriocapillaritis. So the hyperautofluorescence is usually due to outer retinal damage, because when there is choriocapillaris non-perfusion, there is outer retinal damage which unmasks the normal autofluorescence of the RPE. That is the reason for hyper-AF. Sometimes even when there is fluid overlying, the RPE below that is said to be an activated RPE because of higher metabolic activity. So that also causes hyper-AF. And on the other hand, hypo-AF can be because of RPE and outer retinal atrophy. It can be at the center of hyper-AF in choriocapillaritis, which could be due to point leakage. So on a side note, since I was given this topic in anterior uveitis, this is a study in 2016 about iris autofluorescence using near infrared autofluorescence in Fuchs heterochromic iridocyclitis. So here in Fuchs, there is kind of discontinuous pigment rough, petalloid pattern, and reticular pattern of the, I'm sorry, am I interpreting this correctly? Yeah. So this is the infrared autofluorescence of Fuchs heterochromic iridocyclitis, where there is loss of the pupillary rough and the patterns are more exaggerated as seen on infrared autofluorescence. So thank you. I would like comments by the panel for my cases also. Thank you.
So if I may, just 5 points to add, Apurva, to your presentation. The
Yes.
first case, when you look at the mutes, right? So you have the autofluorescence. You know that visual fields is very good because you can see the enlargement of the blind spot. In the absence, a peripapillary enlargement of hypoautofluorescence is also a good takeaway for you to see. And you'll see series of photographs which you have, the peripapillary hypoautofluorescence starts decreasing. So that's one of the ways by which you can even evaluate. And the second point is because DUSN is quite underreported. We get to see few patients here in the eastern coast, and if they don't recover in about 3 weeks' time, consider DUSN as an important differentials for mutes. So those are 2 points for the mutes. This 2 points in for your APMPP. Some of them tend to recur, and the ones which tend to recur, rule out a systemic vasculitis, have a rheumatological consult or immunological consult in those patients. Number two, one way by which you can find out is these are the patients who have initial hypo and then late staining, classical description of fluorescein angiogram, right? But if you see the OCT, they will have very subtle undulations, not amounting to what you get to see in BKH, but even subtler than that. So those are the ones which you have to be extremely careful. And we can also look out for a possible recurrence in those patients, especially even the other eye involvement. So subtle RP undulations with fluorescein characteristics very similar to APMPP. So, and systemic vasculitis is other point which you have to look out. The fifth point which I want to tell you was, because you had this about progression in serpiginous. Now, you know that all patients, the anti-inflammatory therapy may not respond in a very similar fashion. So also in cases of serpiginous, there can be variations. So tailor-made approach, especially ones which is coming very close to the fovea, is of great importance because in some 1 milligram per kg body weight and then taper 10 milligram every week without having a proper documentation of resolution of marginal hyperfluorescence, hyperautofluorescence would get terribly flawed in few patients. So those are the patients where if 1 milligram is not working, you pump steroids in some other form, last but not the least intraocular, to stop the progression from happening. But these are small selected few of patients who behave a little bit different than the rest. So those are the 5 points from my side.
Thank you so much, sir.
I find autofluorescence is
Can you
quite
stop
useful.
sharing, Apurva?
I find autofluorescence is quite useful in case of azure, acute zonal occult outer retinopathy, where
Yes.
you get annular hyperfluorescence.
Yes.
And in case of vision threatening, macular fovea threatening serpiginous choroiditis, I give intravenous methylprednisolone 1 gram daily for 3 consecutive days, and then switch on to steroid or with or without antitubercular treatment.
Yes, sir.
In addition to what has already been said, I would specifically relate to relentless decoy. Now, when you are in a situation like this, it's sometimes a very good idea just to go and do a good vitrectomy, because many times your inflammatory mediators are there and they require a very high amount of steroids to be working. The moment you clear the vitreous, you would realize the need for your systemic medication would go down. Or if you don't want to do vitrectomy, like Avinash said, intravitreal Ozurdex. And the moment you are going to start these patients on ATT, just think that they are going to progress like hell. So you have to give a very good cover of steroids before you are adding ATT, and don't hesitate to take the vitreous out, because you can do all sort of tests. You have a good sample and you also have a good clearing in these. So I agree with Dr. Biswas that to me, autofluorescence, I help in monitoring only two conditions. One is the serpiginous like choroiditis to monitor the response, and second is azure, like where it actually speaks on your face that, well, this is the diagnosis. And the third one, which I found very useful, was a patient which came to me as a IgG4 nephropathy, IgG4 disease. And he had some funny lesions, and I thought maybe there is some kind of inflammation, but that was laser-induced maculopathy. And like, because of his systemic history, we were not thinking of that. But the moment you see that autofluorescence, it is so very characteristic. But thank you for showing us those beautiful, challenging cases.
Very good presentation, Apurva.